Good day and welcome to our session on habits of mind in the elementary classroom. I really was hoping that I would be able to be with you. I think we had some days scheduled to do so, but unfortunately life has taken its bumps. And so here we are again, and I'm really pleased to be able to be with all of you. I'd like to begin by making sure that you know where our landing page is, because what we've done is we've put all of the materials that you're going to be needing, any of the recordings, any of the things that we're doing, they're all going to be there for all of our sessions, that being Heidi Hayes Jacobs, Allison Zamuda, and me. And so I wanted to take you there so you could see where this session is going to be. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to take you right there now. Theoretically, yep, there we go. Okay, and if you can see, the landing page URL is right here. It's learningpersonalized.com/Lower Merion, all one word. So I hope you can see that, learningpersonalized.com/Lower Merion. When you get there, you're going to see Lower Merion, and then the first one up actually is ours, Habits of Mind in Elementary Classroom. And then what you'll see is a link to this recording, which of course we can't do until it's recorded. And then also all the slides that I'm presenting so that you'll have access to all the slides. And in addition, I've put some materials for you. I have some YouTube pieces that you're going to be sent to watch. And I was told that it's better for you to watch it by going to this page and clicking on the YouTube rather than being asked to go to and have it streamed, which often is very funky because of the way the streaming changes if you're on your phone, if you're in a different situation. So all of the materials that I'm presenting to you will also be available to you on this page. So it's a key page for you. And be sure you know how to get to it. And before we get started, perhaps you want to make a tab for it so that you can get to it easily as I pause and stop and ask you to go there. So I'll give you a few seconds to get that organized, and then we'll get started with my presentation. Okay, well, I hope you found it, and I hope if not, that somebody can help you to find it, because it'll be important for you to find all the materials that I've put together. So now let's get started with habits of mind in the elementary classroom. And we'll begin by remembering our transformative goals, because these are the transformative goals that we are working on in Lower Merion. And as you can see, the transformative goals are rooted in the habits of mind. So when we're looking within and beyond the school walls to personal, cultural, global, all of which I'm sure you're paying attention to as you think about the idea of where would we like our students to be when they leave school? Where would we like them to be as they get beyond us, which of course will be something that is both positive and negative. Positive in the sense that we see them off and running perhaps, and doing some of the things that they aspire to do, and that they're becoming full life participants in terms of we're preparing them personally to be able to explore their personal interests, to learn more about themselves, and to take off with that. Perhaps entrepreneurially, perhaps higher education, and culturally, that we want them to be aware of all the diverse populations, perspectives, all the cultural things that we know and that we are a part of very much in our world. And then finally, taking a global perspective and realizing that it's not just this nation, but that we're a set of interdependent nations in a global economy. Now, nothing should tell us more about this whole idea of personal, cultural, and global than the pandemic that we're in right now, because it really speaks so much to how is this affecting us individually, sheltered at home, finding our own ways of surviving with that. How is it happening for us culturally? Look at all the wonderful things that Lower Merion is doing to be able to take care of people from all different perspectives in the community, providing lunches, offering extra opportunities for students, making sure everybody has technology, all the things that were really important in not only looking at who each one of us is individually, but making sure that our community culture is cared for. And then globally, because actually we're in this together. And whether we like it or not, whether we consider ourselves a nation of one or not, we are an interdependent global set of nations right now. And this is powerfully being brought home to us. So are our students ready to live in that environment? Are they ready to really be the kinds of independent learners that we're looking for? So with that in mind, we said that the foundation are the habits of mind. So I'm just going to do a quick remembering of the habits of mind, just in case you haven't had them on your mind, because sometimes they happen, but you're not explicitly naming them. So we're dealing with them, but we're not explicitly naming them. I'm going to make the case throughout our presentation today that the more intentional and explicit we are about naming them when they happen in situations, in our lives, in the way that we deal with things, then I think the more likely we will be to know that when we're stuck and we really don't know what to do, oh, there are some habits of mind that I might use. So getting the idea that it's not that you always have to name them, but if they are a part of your commitment, your memory, the language that you use, it will occur to you at times like this, which is what we call the central idea of habits of mind, which is what do you do when you're really not sure what to do? So when you go on what we might call automaticity and you kind of know what you have to do, fine, you're done. But what happens when you're stuck? When you have a social, emotional, or cognitive stuckness, like I'm not sure, I'm feeling scared, I don't know if I want to take a risk, I'm not sure if this is going to work. What do you do then? And I'm going to suggest that the habits of mind are really those that help us to respond intelligently and empathically when we're confronted with such situations. It doesn't mean that we can't also use other strategies, but the habits of mind provide a cognitive language. So with that in mind, a reminder, here they are, the 16 habits of mind. And what we're going to do is we're going to be thinking together today about how we might use these habits as a way of really preparing our students, having that language, having them understand when to use them and when not to use them. For example, when you're taking some of those really wonderful Pennsylvania state tests, ho, 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 you're not really being asked to find humor. In fact, probably your most important thing is that we want you to be striving for accuracy. And we want you to be thinking about your thinking, be more metacognitive. What's going on for me? How can I really use something I already know? What will help me to answer this problem? So you're really applying past knowledge because it's really a test of some of your past knowledge. And you're also trying to be able to be in the moment and be persisting. So all of those are habits that you would use when you're taking a test, for example. However, when we put you in a group and we say, come up with a new idea, be creating, imagining, and innovating, that's when you might say, and if we find a little humor, it may lighten us up. We may shift our mindset. We may begin to really think differently together, because sometimes the jokes that we tell, the way that we break tension with kind of a humorous way, all helps us to take a mind shift and put our minds toward thinking out of the box rather than being narrowly concerned about, should I take a risk and stay in the box? So you'll notice that what happens with the habits of mind are, it's the language that we need. It's the idea that we understand the situations in which they're most significant and when they're not. And also that we have the capacity to actually build these habits by becoming more strategic. So we have to keep asking ourselves, when I ask you to persist, do I really offer any strategies as to how you can persist? I remember coming really to that understanding very painfully one time when I was working in a school and the student was really interested in it and was talking with me and said, you know, listening with understanding and empathy, boy, That's really an important one. But nobody ever taught me how to listen. And I'm not sure I understand how I can make myself get better at it. I want to, but I'm not sure. And what I realized at that moment so powerfully was just giving the label to it is not sufficient. I also have to provide some strategies. I have to help that student understand that when you're listening, you're opening your mind to someone else's point of view. I have to help them think about what's going on inside their head and how do they open their minds to that. Perhaps it's through paraphrasing. Sometimes I listen better when I paraphrase because it makes me pay attention and know I have to say back what I just heard. Sometimes it's just pausing, letting the other person think so that I can also think and understand. So I don't just jump right in. There are other ideas behind this. So if you think about how can I become a better listener, then I think we have to also ask, and what strategies can you use that will help you? So let's just move on now. But that's a challenge that we have is putting together strategies with some of the habits. And I'm sure many of you know these strategies. I'm sure you teach some. How about putting them together? So let's now look at the next, which is while you were isolated at home, I am sure you have stories to tell. We all have stories to tell. So somewhat of what I'm going to do today with you is I'm going to be modeling some possibilities that you can then use with your students. So as we walk through some of this, I'll model some. My first one is telling a story about when you really persisted when you were at home. One of the teachers that I was working with in a sixth grade situation decided what she was going to do is, whoa, I have 16 weeks worth of online learning that I can do. At least this gives me something to hold on to. So I'll get them used to the habits of mind while we're going for 16 weeks. And what she decided was, I'll give a habit a week. And I'll say, okay, tell me your story. So tell me the story when you really persisted. And when you tell the story, so we can all see it in kind of a gallery, put it on a Padlet. So she established a Padlet. And she said, put your stories on a Padlet. And a Padlet is like a bulletin board. It's a technology piece that I'm sure you've been familiar with. So put it on a Padlet and tell your story there and kind of put it in such a way that you put some slides, one or two slides attached to it, and tell your story in that way. How can you share it visually? How can you share it with some words? Kids really love these bulletin boards and setting up ideas of how they managed. One student said, I persisted in doing chores. When I was asked to do chores because now I'm home more, I thought, oh, I don't really want to do chores. But mom said, you need to persist. I really want you to do these chores. It will be so helpful to the family. So I started thinking about, when am I going to do these chores? So I made a promise. Okay, I'll do the chores when I first wake up in the morning. Well, that didn't exactly work. Sometimes I woke up and I wasn't in the mood. Sometimes it was late when I woke up. Sometimes I could use the excuse, I have schoolwork to do. So my chores got lost. And then what I did was I realized that if I'm going to really do this, I'm going to have to make that promise specific. So then what he decided was, I'll make the promise specific by actually saying the time I'm going to do it and what I'm going to do. Now notice what he was learning was a key strategy for persisting, which is make it manageable, take it in smaller steps, set it as a goal, and prompt yourself as to when you're going to do it. And he found that when he did that, he actually was able to do his chores by distributing over time what he normally would have tried to do, take 2 hours and get it done. He distributed it over time and was able to do what he was asked to do. Well, that's a happy ending. Sometimes persisting doesn't always work, but we try. We really work at it. Now you just take a few moments and if you will, in the chat, just share briefly a story of when you really persisted, when you managed your impulsivity, when you responded with wonderment and awe at something that happened, when you created, imagined, or innovated. So choose a habit, anyone, and tell a small story in your chat. I'll give you 5 minutes to do that. I hope that when you do that, you also take a few moments to just look through the chat. But the chat will be saved so you can always look back over it. But you're getting the idea. I'm sure that you found that there were times when you actually did use one of the habits of mind. You really did see that it was there. It may not have been conscious or intentional. So our work today is going to be helping our students and ourselves to be more conscious and intentional. Again, the point is that when you do it automatically, not a problem, it's there for you. But when you don't know what to do, can you name a habit that you could call upon? Could you say, wow, this is a time when I may need to pay attention to what I learned about persisting. This is a time when I may need to pay attention to managing my impulsivity. And as soon as I have the name, I also can remember the strategy. So let's talk about a few habits and teaching them directly. Now, one of the questions that so many people have asked me all the time is it okay if we just do one habit or 3 habits? Do we have to do 16? And this is a way of saying to you, you don't have to do all 16 all at once. Ultimately, you want to provide the landscape for students. You want them to know that there are 16, and you want them to know that so that they can call upon it when they need it. However, you don't need to use all 16 all at once. You can give them an opportunity to meet them, to see them, to greet them, to get used to them. So many people do it 1 a week, 1 a month. Many people do it like in the early years, we'll just focus on these. In the later years we'll focus on these. But thinking about it, because as your whole system you are, by the time the students are done with elementary school, they should have the familiarity with the landscape of 16 habits of mind. At your school, you may think about how you're going to manage that. In your classroom, nothing says to you that just because the school decided we're going to work in the early years on only these 3, if you see, wow, this is really working, and I'd like the kids to know all the habits, you're always free to make those choices in response to your students. So it's up to you. Sometimes, once the school has made some decisions so that it works more systemically, then you can make your own choices in response to your students. So I'm suggesting that you always begin the school year by choosing a few habits and reminding them by teaching them directly. Now, where would it make the most sense? And I would suggest that now that we're working in multiple scenarios where we're doing things such as we're in perhaps a hybrid situation where we're half in, half out. Perhaps it's totally distanced again and we're not together. Or perhaps it's class rules, but we're in a different space. Some of us are needing to wear masks. Some schools are asking students to sit at a distance. So what are our class rules and how will we encourage? And so I'm suggesting that these 4 attributes that Allison Zamuda and I named in our Students at the Center Personalized Learning with Habits of Mind, that what we're really talking about here is how do you personalize your classroom using the opportunity for students to express voice, being able, as I said, here, you can use the habit of how do we listen to one another and respect each other's voice when we contribute in the classroom. We can talk about co-creation and how will we think interdependently when we're working in small groups and when we're working together with our teacher to kind of do something as we're co-creating these class rules, which is an example. We might talk about social construction, where we're really asking how do we deepen our understanding and the meaning of things. And when we're doing that, we may be asking, what questions do we ask? What problems do we pose? How do we make sure that we're really deepening our understanding? And then self-discovery, which is how am I thinking about my thinking? I need to be metacognitive. I need to understand who I'm becoming as a student. So co-creating class rules can be a very profitable way to make the habits very prominent. Even little ones understand them. But you could start with one. For example, Just start with listening. Listening is central to our class rules. Nobody, I think, knows this better than we have in our early childhood classrooms, where we know how difficult it is to get the students to manage their impulsivity. Don't raise your hand. Don't blurt out. Wait until you're sure the other person is finished before you start to talk. So we can get them, and we all have strategies for doing that, to help the students to become more internal. So, for example, in managing your impulsivity, we might say, when you're thinking of something and you really are having a hard time listening to the other person, maybe you need to draw a picture of what you want to say. Maybe you need to write a note. Many upper grade students have note cards with them. So when we're going to have a discussion, we always give them a note piece, for example. And we say, when something comes to mind that you want to say, just write down a few key words so that you can continue to tune in to what the other person is saying. So that's a strategy. It's a way of doing it. For young children, one of the things that we've done, and of course, all these work adaptably, but I know that we've been paying particular attention to our younger students and asking the question, well, how would it work there? And one of the things that we find is really amazing is just to say, stop, think before you want to say something. So you stop and you think and you listen to the other person. So, for example, if I'm devoting my energy to someone else, then I might be saying, okay, let's begin. Let's begin by asking ourselves, if we're really listening, if we're really listening to the other person, what would I see happening that would tell me that we're really listening? So we have a little checklist that Art Costa and I have developed. And it's about saying, am I doing this often? Am I doing this sometimes? Or am I not yet quite doing it? So let's just look for a moment. And you all know, I'm sure, from the work of Carol Dweck and looking at the question of how we really keep a positive, growing mindset, an open mindset, is that we say not yet. We don't say not at all. So what's not yet that we need to grow with? So we might say, well, what do we see that tells us that we're really listening with understanding and empathy? Well, now this is kind of strange time when, if we're on remote learning, what we see is we really look at the person who's talking and we really watch for indicators. So we might say that the person is pausing. That's something we might see. We might see that when we're in a group and there's 3 or 4 people, then we might look and we might see only, as one second grade student told me one time, what do you see when people are really listening? And she said, I see only one pair of lips moving at a time. Nice way to look for it. So what would we see? If we're wearing a mask, our eyes may tell us something. Do we see that the other person is still leaning forward, is still actively engaged? You could tell when I stopped because I would pause for a moment. So let's pay attention to the indicators. What do we see when someone is really listening with understanding and empathy? Another thing that we see, another thing that we do is we ask, and what do we hear? What are some of the things that we hear that suggest it? And because we may be in a distance learning situation, what we hear may be really important. For example, after you've said something, what I might hear is somebody saying something like, well, is this really what you meant? Can you help me understand this? I might hear that. I might say that. I might be the one that's seeking understanding. You might hear something like, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. Let me see if I get what you're saying. I might paraphrase that. So I might use paraphrasing in order to say what I see and what I hear, rather what I hear. So what I hear is what I hear people saying that's an indicator that I am in fact listening with understanding and empathy. Empathy, of course, as we know, is not sympathy. It's not, oh, I'm really sorry about that, so much as I think you're feeling really sorry about that. as I listened to you, I could see that that was a difficult situation. So what you're doing is you're really identifying with the other person. You're not just sympathizing, you're really identifying with the feeling state of the other person or with how they were doing what they were doing. So now let's just look at that and ask ourselves, when you look for indicators for understanding and empathy, and let's really look at it now and say, you've been in dozens of Zoom calls. What do you see that helps you to know that someone is really listening? What do you hear? How do you observe that? Take a few moments and put that in the chat, and then we'll come back. So we're beginning to get some ideas now about how this works, how we can start with one habit, how we can move along with it, but how we can teach it with a little more emphasis so that we're giving some explicit instruction with students, and then how we can find our students able to measure, how am I doing? Am I getting better at this? So it can be that I do that checklist as a self-assessment. It can be that a teacher does the checklist to observe it, gives you, some information and feedback about it. I noticed that when you were doing this, I saw you saying, I heard you doing, I saw what you were working on. So you can play with this in any way. Self-assessment and self-observation will probably be the most important one right now because we're not so sure when we will be coaching. However, we could make some broader statements like I saw in the last Zoom call when we were all working together, I saw so-and-so saying, I heard so-and-so saying, I saw so-and-so doing. So you can start pointing out what you observe so that you're able to say, even though you're in a remote situation, what are you observing that helps you to notice that the students are using habits of mind? So our ultimate goal is that we want to help our students to become more self-directed, which is why I'm suggesting that the self-assessment piece may be the most important and critical piece that we have. So I know that you use habits of mind on your report cards, but don't forget that an important part of reporting is students being able to tell how they are doing with the habits of mind. So when we become more self-directed, one of the things we have to do is we shift our role as teachers. We're no longer reminding them all the time, telling them all the time, saying what we want them to do, so much as now we're coaching them for deeper thinking. So our role shifts. Instead of being the one who's always in charge, we're letting go some. And when we let go, we're coaching for deeper thinking. That's what we're doing to help develop the self-directed learner. So self-directed learning, just as with the habits of mind, must be explicitly taught. We have decades of research that tell us that when it's explicitly taught and when we give time for reflection on what we're learning, we develop a better sense of what it means to be self-directed. So when we're teaching the habits of mind, let's think about which ones help them to be most self-directed. For example, what we just did with listening, we might really make sure that they understand that when you're managing yourself, you're managing the way you listen, you're managing your impulsivity. So there's a whole critical piece of managing yourself. When you're in the process of learning, and I'm going to be showing you some examples, then you're really thinking about how are you working interdependently? How are you planning together? How are you thinking together? So notice explicitly taught self-managing tools and the habits of mind are those tools that they can put in their backpack and say, okay, I know how to manage myself because I have some thoughtful, logical tools for cognitive development. I have the habits of mind. And while you do that, you increase the opportunity for them to learn it. So when you're asking them to do, for example, the 7 problems that are necessary on the worksheet as practice, I think that's fine. That's how we develop some fluency. But that is really not the time, perhaps, when we can get the most out of being able to think about the habits of mind. There are 2 that always work, persisting and striving for accuracy. But when we broaden it and broaden the situations, now we're really asking the students doing more problem solving, more thinking, not just doing the kinds of things that are skill building, which are practices and important ones, but now where do they apply those skills? That's where we really can see the payoff on all of this. So we're progressively moving students toward becoming more learner generated, things that are less teacher generated, more teacher and student co-created, and leading to developing students to begin to create and generate their own ideas. But notice we use the term progressively, meaning we don't just say, hey kids, here's an opportunity, do as you like. We even see people who are doing making spaces and Genius Bar and all the rest of it. We're beginning to see that it requires some structure. It requires some sense of what are you going to do now? Make a plan, set some goals. Don't just jump in and imagine that you can just do this helter-skelter and that it will truly be a learning experience. So beginning to think about, no matter how open-ended we become, we have taught the students how to think through how to be self-directed. So here's an example of a little girl in Cambodia, actually. And you'll notice she is 4 years old, and she has been asked to think about the habits of mind when she does her work, because the teacher has been emphasizing habits of mind. So I was asked about early childhood. I wanted to make sure that we put some examples in. If you can now go to YouTube, and you can see it on YouTube. So what I'm trying to say is go to the learning page. Remember, learningpersonalized.com / Lower Merion. And you'll see the YouTube of this child gathering data with all senses. It will be about 3 minutes. So just take the 3 minutes. I'll give you 5 minutes to make sure you find the landing page and you move there. Now that you're back, I'm going to give you a few ideas, and these are ones that were drawn from the work on accountable talk in the University of Pittsburgh when people were working on this whole idea of how do we make sure that we're developing accountable talk. Now, these are in the handout on Learning Personalized, but they give you an idea of showing how students can begin to develop their voice, how they can begin to engage with conversations. So for example, what they're doing here is when they add on, we give them some prompts, we give them some sentence starters, and we might have those available for students so that they can say, in addition to what has been stated, I think, notice how that begins to get to the, am I listening with understanding and empathy? I would add that. Notice how that means, I heard you, and now I'm going to add to that. So notice how these conversation prompts all relate to how I'm doing with the habits of mind. Notice if we say call to action, based on what we just learned, I think we should. We're applying past knowledge. What can we do about? We're questioning and posing problems. I believe it is important for us to, we're thinking about our thinking. So notice again, we can take any one of these prompts and associate them with a habit of mind and ask them to practice them. And we don't have to give them all the prompts all at once. We can slow ourselves up, but the prompts are ways to keep us in a deeper understanding and a deeper thinking as we're working on something. So that's one way that we can associate the habits of mind. When you see these examples and it helps you to develop thinking, will you in the chat just do a few examples of your own of where you see students being able to develop their thinking and how you might use this as a way? So now we're talking about self-direction and project-based learning, because this is an opportunity where we really can coach for thinking. The first is to take you to Learning Personalized again and to have you look at this incredible example on YouTube of students in a kindergarten classroom in Brazil and how they did thinking interdependently with teamwork. If you find that you don't have the time to do this for this presentation, you can always go back and see it later. I'm going to suggest that perhaps that's a good idea because we may really need to be moving along. So you can make the decision. This is a recorded session. And if you find that you need to kind of move along, just know it's there for you. So when we're coaching for thinking, we have three ways of looking at that. We're planning, we're monitoring, and we're reflecting. When we're in a project, we want to invite our students to first define what their project is about. Notice that's often goal setting. We want them to set and clarify their goals, making sure they're manageable enough, small enough, narrow enough. We want them to envision some strategies of what they might use, and we want them to anticipate which habits of mind they might be using. So the key habits you will need to use as coaches is you will need to be listening with understanding and empathy, questioning and posing problems, and thinking and communicating with clarity and precision. So it plays this way. When you're listening with understanding and empathy, and a student is saying, gee, I have this really good project. And notice, by the way, that this, even if you're in remote learning, conferences with students, one-to-one is really possible and really a good way to use some synchronous time. It's better often than whole class synchronous instruction. It's really making dates with students for conferences. And in addition, small group. So we can say, we're inviting your thinking. And inviting thinking means I'm not going to give you advice right now. I'm really going to be inviting you to do the thinking. So I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to paraphrase. I'm going to empathize. I'm going to question so that you get more clarity and precision. How much time do you think it will take? What resources do you suppose you might need? Now notice this is really asking you to manage your impulsivity, because your first instinct might be to say, "Whoa, I know some great people who might be able to help you. I have a friend who once did. I think the audience could be." But what you want to do is co-create with the students in this time. You want to get them to begin to understand what's possible. So you're jumping in and taking it over and throwing out a lot of ideas will distract them from being pushed to think on their own about what does this really mean? What does it imply? And this part of the planning is critical for students as they become more self-directed, because these are the questions they need to ask when they're doing a project like an independent study or something where you're not going to have all the time to go through it with them. But these are the questions they begin to internalize and know they have to ask themselves. And then help them anticipate which of the habits of mind will serve them best. Which do they think in this project they would need to pay attention to? What will be most helpful to them? So when we go here, well, wait a minute, I just missed one, I'm sorry. Okay, hold on a second. What I'm going to ask you to do now is I set up a Google Doc. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this Google Doc of coaching questions and coaching moves. So while they're working on their projects, you invite them to monitor by reflecting what is going on well with your project. What are you doing to make it successful? Which habits of mind are you employing? So now you're really getting them to pay attention to the habits of mind you're employing. And then when students have completed their projects, you ask them to reflect. What have you learned from the way we planned for getting started with your project? How might you coach yourself the next time you have to do a project? And this is where I was going to take you to the Google Doc. So I'm sorry, I kind of messed up a little there. But what I'm going to do now is say that on the landing page, learningpersonalized.com/Lower Merion, you're going to find a Google Doc that I set up. You can just click on that Google Doc on the landing page. It says Google Doc. And what you'll find is that you're able to go directly to the landing page, go directly to the Google Doc. You all have access to it. And at that place, I'm going to ask you to take some time now to generate some questions. How might you use some of these questions for coaching for thinking? And so I walked you through, and now I'm asking you, what kinds of questions can you ask to help them define their purposes? What kinds of questions can you ask to help them set and clarify their goals? How do you help them to envision the strategies they're going to need to actually accomplish their goals and anticipate which habits of mind will serve them to do their work? So this is an opportunity to build a chart of questions that you might ask that you'll have access to. And you might want to say ECE for early childhood, and you might want to say UE for upper elementary, so that you know that these need to be adapted for different situations. But actually, questions really generally are pretty adaptive, so you should have a good, nice chart when you're done. Now, I wanted to be sure I gave you time for that, so I'm going to ask you to take 10 minutes now and play with the chart, generate some questions, and then we'll come back. Now, finally, one of the things that we've been talking about is how might parents be partners in helping their children grow the habits? Now that students are often at home learning and parents have seen what's complicated and what's also interesting about home learning, and one of the things I'm sure that they're observing is their desire to really either jump in and save the kids from learning, like, let me help you with this so you can get it done, and or they're saying, go ahead and do your work. But maybe what we really are trying to do is help our parents be partners in helping them to grow the habits. So I put a special doc that you will be able to download on that learning page. And the doc is one that's written directly for parents about the habits of mind. So what Art Costa and I did is we modified the original article and we made it read for parents and what they can do to support the habits at home. Here's something from a school in San Francisco, where one of the ways that they involve parents is they have the bracelets that they did, very inexpensive. Each one is a habit. The kids get them over the years. They love it. And one of the things that they do in the school is, as a school, they have an assembly each month. And in the assembly, they focus on the habit of the month that the school has been focusing on. So for them, the whole school chooses one habit that they're going to focus on, and then they really pay attention to it throughout the month. Not that it's the only habit you use, but that's the one they're explicitly paying attention to. And then what they do is they name it, and then they have a little bracelet for it. And students get the award of, here from our kindergarten class, so-and-so is getting an award for persisting, and the bracelet that they receive. Or we may just say all students in the school get the bracelet. Tell a story of when you were persisting and you will get the bracelet. So that we really begin to connect it to when you're using the habit, tell your story about it, show evidence of it, and then you get the bracelet. But what we also do is notice that when they go home proudly with these bracelets or talk about the bracelets or really get involved with it, the parents ask, well, what's that all about? And the kids can tell them, well, this is what I did to persist, and this is why I got the bracelet. Or they can talk about how important the habits are. For this particular school, these bracelets, inexpensive as they are, have really been an enormous and wonderful connection because the kids wear them out in the community and they begin to say, here's what we do with habits of mind. Then we also see that there's a newsletter sometimes, and the newsletter is focusing on a habit. Sometimes there are other communications. In one school in Pennsylvania, in Council Rock in Pennsylvania, what they did that was really interesting, it's a K-2 school, and they decided that they wanted to educate their neighbors while they were in distance learning. And so what they did was they wrote, each one decided that they would write to 2 neighbors asking the question, we're studying persisting. Here's what I did to persist while I've been home. What have you done? Can you tell me your story? And they got lots of responses, and it was just a wonderful way for them to feel like they were connecting with their neighbors, connecting with the habits, and helping the neighborhood and the community to understand what they were doing. Involving parents is really important. They are our partners. The more they learn how to help the students to become more self-managing, to really be able to process their learning, to not feel like, I got it done, I hope I get a good grade, but I got it done and here's what I learned. If we can get them to be describing rather than just asking, how many did you get right? How many did you get wrong? How am I going to help you to get better at it? I'm going to help you to get better at it by helping you to learn how to manage yourself, how to really modify based on feedback that you get, and how to actually improve your learning and improve your work because you are becoming more than just a student of schooling, you're becoming a student of life. So, with that in mind, I would suggest to you, don't worry that children never listen to you. Worry that they are always watching you. So, more than anything else, you need to model the habits of mind. You need to find your ways to be managing your impulsivity when your instinct is to just rescue them, to be able to listen to them closely instead of being impatiently waiting for them to finish, being able to actually invite thinking flexibly rather than saying it's one way, inviting them to co-create with you. All of the ways that you model these habits of mind with them, for them, and in your own life, I think you will find that it is something that will lead you to what do we do when we really stuck and don't know what to do. Thank you for being with me today.